Hello, my name is Delith Hayes, and 3 months ago, my brother-in-law accused me of stealing a platinum tie clip during my father's birthday dinner. By the next night, my room had been ransacked, my voice erased, and my family turned into strangers. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I watched them bury me alive, then smiled when they didn't realize I was still breathing. And this is the night it all began. I didn't hear the music at first, only the clinking of ice in someone's glass and the squeak of my shoes on the polished hardwood floor. My mother's voice floated from somewhere near the entrance, directing the caterers like she was running a state dinner, not just Dad's 70th birthday. I walked in holding the extra tray of silverware. I wasn't even on the guest list. The air felt warm, soft, but my skin prickled, not from the cold. It was something else, a presence. I saw Alaric before he saw me. He stood near the far end of the room in a crisp, navy suit, too perfect for the occasion. His hands folded behind his back, eyes scanning the crowd like a man counting assets. When his gaze caught mine, he smiled, not the kind of smile you return. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. A waiter approached him quietly and handed over a small black velvet box. He opened it, empty. His jaw tightened, not in surprise, but in satisfaction. That's where it all started. We moved through the dinner like extras in our own family play. The centerpieces were tall and cold. The speeches were shorter than the wine list. I watched the guests, mostly investors and old friends who'd only reappear when it benefited them. Dad made his toast, awfully kissed him on the cheek, dabbing fake tears with a cloth napkin. Then Alaric cleared his throat. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, voice calm, charming almost. "But something's missing." Chatter dropped off like someone had pulled the fire alarm. He lifted the empty velvet box above his shoulder. This was supposed to hold my family's heirloom tie clip. Platinum, been passed down for 3 generations. He let the lid snap shut. I left it on the table, right over there. He pointed behind me, and now it's gone. I didn't move, but I felt the heat gather at the base of my neck. Alaric turned slowly, his voice casual, but his eyes already locked on me. "You were the last one near that table, weren't you, Delith?" My father, who hadn't made eye contact with me all night, spoke up. "Answer him." My mother didn't look at me either. She just whispered, "Please tell me you did not tonight." No one said she wouldn't. Someone at the next table muttered, "I saw her walk by earlier." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat felt glued shut. I reached for my water glass and realized my hand was shaking. I wasn't cold. I was humiliated. They say stress makes people do strange things, Alaric added lightly. And Delith's had a lot on her plate, hasn't she? The crowd murmured again. Didn't she lose her job? I thought she still lived with them. Heard she was in therapy. They weren't even whispering anymore. I haven't done anything wrong, yet I'm already losing. My hand went to my phone on the table. I didn't unlock it, just held it, knuckles turning white. I could feel the glances piling onto me like weights. I wasn't even sure who I was anymore in this room. My mother placed a hand on my wrist, not to calm me, but to keep me still. Alaric took a step forward. "If she returns it now," he said, smiling, "we can forget this happened." He gave me an exit and a sentence at the same time. Everyone waited. No one moved. I tried to breathe, but the air didn't come easy. I stood slowly. My chair scraped the floor louder than any of the speeches. I pushed it back into place, careful not to look at anyone. I turned to walk away, but Alaric stepped into my path. Leaving won't make you look innocent. My legs froze. Not because I was scared of him, but because I knew how this would look. If I stayed, I was guilty. If I left, I was guilty. Awfully, still hadn't said a word. Her wine glass had fogged over from her fingers, untouched. I looked at her once. Just once. Her eyes didn't move. Not even to blink. I think that hurt more than anything Alaric said. I steadied myself, not to fight, not to cry, but just enough to walk. If they wanted me gone, I'd give them what they wanted. But I wasn't leaving empty. I wasn't leaving silent. They'd already chosen what version of me they wanted to believe. And now, I'd show them what happened when the story didn't end where they thought it would. I turned away. Walked down the hall where the air got colder with every step. Behind me, no one followed. No one called out. My shadow stretched along the polished floor, longer than it had any right to be. It looked like someone else was leaving that night. I kept walking until the last trace of laughter faded behind me. The cold in that hallway followed me into the guest room like a shadow I couldn't shake. I shut the door gently, hoping the quiet might soothe the shaking in my hands. It didn't. My breath felt trapped somewhere between my ribs and my throat, suspended in a place I didn't know how to reach. When I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipped as if it, too, expected someone else to be there. The ceiling looked unfamiliar, even though I'd stared at it countless times through childhood fevers and late-night arguments that bled through the walls. I lay back fully clothed, shoes still on, staring at the faint cracks in the plaster. My heart wouldn't settle. It kept racing as if trying to outrun the truth I already knew. Looking back now, that quiet moment should have warned me what was coming. From downstairs, voices swelled, blurred syllables rising and falling like waves hitting a shore I didn't belong to anymore. Someone slammed a cabinet. Someone else hissed my name. Then footsteps, heavy, certain, moved down the hallway. The light outside my door flicked on. Shadows cut across the floor. Then a sharp, unhesitating knock. I learned quickly, when a family chooses silence over truth, they choose their guilt over you. That thought pressed through my mind just as the door swung open. Dad stepped in first. Not angry, not confused, just resolved. Behind him stood Alaric with his hands in his pockets and awfully half hidden behind his shoulder. Eyes lowered as if she wasn't part of this. But she was. They all were. Dad said, "We're not accusing. We're confirming." He walked to my dresser without asking. He pulled open the top drawer. Socks spilled out. Then the next drawer. My shirts tumbled to the floor. My nightstand followed. Alaric opened the closet, pushing hangers aside with slow, deliberate movements. "I just want to make sure nothing got misplaced," he said, voice firm enough to sound official, but not enough to pretend it was kind. He didn't look at me. None of them did. My underwear hit the carpet, my toiletries, the notebook where I kept passwords written in tiny handwriting because Mom always said memory wasn't something you could trust forever. My jewelry box tipped over, contents scattering like confessions. The small mirror inside reflected their movements back at me, turning the room into an interrogation. I don't remember breathing. I only remember my hands refusing to lift my body pinned by disbelief instead of fear. They weren't searching, they were sentencing. Dad lifted the pillow. A small envelope slid out. He held it up. Where did this come from? It's just cash, I said quietly. Money I saved from side work. You're not employed. I've been doing odd jobs. Ask Mom. She knew. Awfully finally spoke. She's been gone a while, Delith. My chest tightened. The room swayed. I could hear my pulse louder than their accusations. Looking back, I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. Because in that instant, I understood. The decision had been made long before the tie clip disappeared. They needed a villain, and I was the easiest one to cast. Hours later, the house finally fell into silence. They left me alone with the mess they made. I picked up the envelope, held it to my chest, and tried to swallow the truth pressing against my ribs. I failed. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No texts. Not from my mother. Not from anyone. But early the next morning, while clearing out junk messages, I noticed an audio transcription tucked between spam mail and appointment reminders. A voicemail from her, time-stamped before everything exploded. I don't know what's happening, her trembling voice said. I'm trying to speak up, but they won't listen. Please don't leave angry. I believe you. My fingers shook. I tapped the audio. Message deleted. Someone had erased it. Someone wanted me to feel entirely alone. Someone wanted my mother's voice, my only defense, to disappear. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I went downstairs. My suitcase sat by the door, already zipped. Someone had packed it for me. My father handed me a folded paper, a temporary ban from property, 30 days. No police, no shouting, just a clean, efficient removal. No one wants to make this uglier than it has to be, Alaric said, as if he hadn't created the ugliness himself. My mother never came out of her room. Awfully stood at the top of the stairs, arms crossed, watching me like I was a stranger standing in her doorway. I walked out without shoes on. The air outside bit at my skin. Behind me, the door shut with a heavy thud that echoed long after the latch caught. I stood at the curb, staring at the home that raised me and swallowed me whole. My phone buzzed. A promotional text flashed across the screen. We see you've left something behind. Want to complete your purchase? My breath wavered. My heart didn't. They were right. I whispered. I left something behind. The part of me that believed they loved me. They wanted me invisible, so I made sure I was untouchable. 3 hours after the door slammed behind me, I was curled up on a couch that wasn't mine, staring at a ceiling that looked like it forgot how to hold weight. The fan blades above spun unevenly, clinking with every turn like something inside was loose and slowly dying. I lay wrapped in a blanket that smelled like detergent and would smoke. Not home, but not hostile. Jonah hadn't called, but I checked my phone anyway, hoping for something. Anything that would tether me back to someone who saw me as more than a liability. Instead, a single notification blinked back. One missed call. One message. Hey, just heard what happened. I think we should take space. I've got a lot on my plate at work, and I just think you need time too. Hope you're okay. He didn't sign his name. He didn't need to. My thumb hovered over the text. I didn't feel heartbreak, just another piece of weight pressed against a body already sinking. Thanks for being honest. I typed. Then I deleted the thread. That moment wasn't a surprise. It was a confirmation. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. 2 weeks earlier, Jonah brought me a plant for my desk. A tiny green shoot in a square white pot. I joked I'd kill it within days. That's okay, he smiled. This one grows even when ignored. It didn't. It's back in my suitcase now, upside down, soil scattered through my clothes, roots broken, stem bent at the middle like a person who stopped standing for too long. Rain traced thin lines down the apartment window. I watched the world blur outside while I remained perfectly still, the ache in my chest expanding and folding like a tide I couldn't push back. Later that afternoon, I needed air, or a distraction, maybe both. I pulled on a hoodie, tucked my hair beneath a knit hat, and walked to the corner store. The bell above the door chirped, a sound too cheerful for a body too emptied. The second I stepped inside, I heard a voice that reached into an old part of me. Well, if it isn't Awfully's cousin, Mrs. Ashland, my high school art teacher. I turned slowly. She didn't recognize me right away, but her voice carried that polite southern warmth, like honey masking vinegar. I haven't seen your sister in forever, she said, still doing that investment thing with her husband. I nodded once. They are. She squinted. And you remind me the cousin, right? I forced a smile. That's me. She patted my arm gently. You always had such a quiet presence. Thought you moved away. No, I'd just been deleted. It wasn't forgetting. It was reassigning my existence to someone else. Looking back, I didn't realize that was the moment I stopped wanting to be remembered. I bought a box of tea and walked home in silence. The rain had slowed to a mist, the kind that clings to your skin long after the storm has passed. When I reached my mailbox, there was no name on it, just tenant 2B. Inside, 2 bills addressed to resident. No one expected me. No one claimed me. Even the electric company doesn't know I exist. Back upstairs, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my contacts. 34 names. None of them felt reachable. I scrolled through voicemails, all saved out of habit. Mom's old reminder about doctor's appointments. Awfully asking if I picked up her dry cleaning. My father's clipped voice telling me not to embarrass the family at a holiday event. I deleted every one of them. Then I changed my phone's wallpaper from a photo of last year's Christmas dinner, where I sat 3 chairs away from the head of the table and still somehow felt like a guest, to a plain black screen. Not out of drama, out of necessity. From now on, I'd be the one watching, not the one waiting. It started with a live stream, a slideshow that didn't have my name on it, but had my words, my work, and my voice. The morning light crept through the blinds in thin, uneven lines, landing across my laptop like it was trying to warn me before the video even loaded. I sat cross-legged on the small rug near my bed, my knees drawn up as though they could hold me steady. I pressed spacebar. The audio clicked on. The camera focused on a ballroom stage I knew by heart. The same rented backdrop my family used for quarterly meetings, the same blue lighting they insisted made the company feel modern. I hadn't stepped foot there in weeks, yet the smell of that room, cologne, stale pastries, a bit of floor polish, found its way back into my throat. Revenue turnaround strategy, presented by Awfully Hayes. That title slid onto the screen with a confidence I didn't own anymore. I felt something tighten in my chest, like a hand gripping me from inside. I recognized every line on that slide, every margin, every projected curve. I built those charts while watching Mom sleep in the hospital, writing with one hand while holding hers with the other. Looking back now, I should have known the moment I saw that slide that nothing in my old life belonged to me anymore. The video zoomed in on the podium. Awfully stepped forward, smiling as if she had lived through the work she was about to claim. She spoke clearly, her tone steady, every syllable placed carefully like stepping stones across a river she never had to wade through. My jaw tightened until I tasted iron. "She's wearing my skin," I murmured, but the apartment didn't need to hear it. It already knew. Another slide flashed, a risk analysis report. Investors relied on these to decide whether to stay or walk away. At the bottom corner, prepared by Alaric Hayes, strategic advisor. No, the formatting, mine. The tone, mine. The math, mine. They took the numbers I had whispered into existence, while everyone believed I was too fragile to contribute anything valuable. They had copied the warnings I gave my father months before all of this fell apart. My hand shook slightly on the mouse. Not fear, recognition. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. A memory pulled me backward. I was sitting in my father's office. The day sun bounced through the blinds in stripes across his desk. I held the risk report in my hands, fresh from the printer, still warm. I'd said, "Dad, if the market shifts, we need a buffer. Please look at this." He didn't even skim it. He tapped the corner of the papers together and said, "You worry too much. Let Alaric handle real strategy." I remember the way my throat felt tight, as if even my voice wanted to disappear. Back to the present. Awfully laughed lightly as she read my opening line word for word. My stomach twisted, not because she stole it, but because she didn't even understand what she was saying. It meant nothing to her. It was a weapon to them. I closed my eyes, breathed once, twice, and something inside me shifted quietly, cleanly, like a blade being pulled from a sheath. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't ignorance. This was a systematic erasure, a deliberate replacement of my name with theirs, my hours with their applause, my warnings with their signatures. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I hit the download button. The file saved to my desktop, blinking like a heartbeat. I renamed it. Proof they used my work. If they pretend I contributed nothing, why do they keep using everything I wrote? That thought felt like a truth I had been circling for weeks without daring to touch. The live stream ended with applause, the kind that echoed with self-congratulation rather than respect. Awfully bowed slightly, her smile bright enough to blind the part of the world that still believed she earned any of this. Alaric clapped harder than anyone, nodding like a man admiring a portrait of himself. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't break. I closed my laptop gently, almost with affection, like sealing away evidence that finally aligned with the reality I'd been trying to name. They wanted to bury me. They forgot I can dig too. By the time the applause from that live stream faded from my laptop speakers, the room felt heavier than it had all week. I sat there for a long minute, staring at the blank screen as though it might offer something: comfort, closure, a direction to breathe toward. None of that came. What came instead was the soft vibration of my phone against the table. One notification. A single ping in the quiet. It was the first breadcrumb. proof that someone else still remembered I existed. The subject line read, "Account access update." At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe a leftover automated alert from before everything exploded. But the date was recent. Too recent. 3 weeks after my exile. Someone inside that company triggered something tied to my name. Looking back now, I should have braced myself before clicking. I opened the attached PDF without thinking. The table of numbers blinked into focus. At first, my mind recognized the layout, the standard payroll sheet I used to help cross-check during tax season. Then I saw the fields filled out. Employee ID, mine. Pay period, last month. Amount, correct. Recipient account, wrong. Completely wrong. The ending digits, 4,910, belonged to Awfully. I'd seen her use that card at Target 1,000 times, the way she'd flip it like a business badge. The air left my lungs in one long, muted ache. I pressed my palm to my chest, as if that could steady the sudden throb beneath my ribs. My back hit the chair, sinking into it, like my body was trying to fold into itself. They paid her with my work. They paid her with my dignity. I didn't cry. And it wasn't strength. It was something colder, heavier. That's the thing about repeated hits. Eventually the pain stops announcing itself. It just settles into your bones. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. Hours later, when the afternoon rain softened into a thin whisper against the window, I opened Instagram for the first time in days. I wasn't looking for anything. That's the truth. But the universe, if it had a sense of irony, handed me something anyway. A birthday post. Awfully. Smiling in perfect lighting. Caption. Her strength lives in us. My fingers stilled over the screen. Then I zoomed in. Around her neck sat a bracelet, a delicate gold chain with a tiny oval charm. Our mother's. The one she gave to me while lying in a hospital bed, her hand frail but determined as she fastened it around my wrist. "This is for you," she whispered. "You'll know why one day." My throat tightened with a pressure that threatened to rise but refused to break. I whispered into the empty room. She gave it to me. Awfully had stolen more than my work, more than my income. She had taken a piece of the only person who ever saw me without needing anything in return. Looking back, I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I scrolled away, then back. I saved the photo, not to hold on to the memory, but to record the proof. I set the phone aside and walked to the tiny closet near my bed. On the top shelf sat a paper folder labeled Personal Copies, something I'd created years ago when I first realized our family loved to rewrite history whenever it suited them. Inside were old screenshots, emails, timelines, early drafts, notes I'd kept because some part of me always knew the day would come when I'd need to remind myself of the truth. I slipped the payroll error inside, then printed the Instagram photo and added it on top. One page at a time, I could feel a kind of order returning to my life. An order built not from fear, but intention. They stole my name, my income, my history. Now, I'm collecting it back. I added a sticky note to the front. Proof, intentional erasure. My handwriting looked steadier than I felt. That's where it all started. I walked to the bathroom mirror. The light flickered overhead, a bulb that needed replacing, but I didn't care. I wasn't looking at the flaws in the reflection. I wasn't searching for what they'd taken. I was checking if I was still here. I'm still standing, I said softly, not a declaration, more like a confirmation. And then a sentence I didn't plan. It rose from somewhere deep, somewhere steady. If they can falsify the record, then so can I, truthfully, as if reclaiming the narrative wasn't revenge, but restoration. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. The apartment felt unusually still that morning, as if the walls were holding their breath right along with me. I hadn't planned to leave the house, but something in me needed noise, voices that weren't accusing, footsteps that weren't marching toward a closed door. So I walked to the cafe on the corner, the one where the barista always spelled my name wrong, and the chairs leaned a little to the left. At least the mistakes there weren't personal. My coffee sat untouched, cooling by the minute. I kept clicking through files on my laptop, replaying the last few days in my mind. Every betrayal had a timestamp now. Every violation had a digital trail. I was building something slowly, quietly, but I didn't yet know what shape it would take. Then an email appeared. No subject, no sender, just a blank space where identity should have been. For a moment, I assumed it was spam. Or worse, another automated reminder from a life that no longer included me. But something in my gut tugged me toward it. I tapped it open. I didn't expect it to come from someone inside. That thought crossed my mind before I even clicked the attachment. Risk Ledger, version 1.3, original.docs. The file opened slowly, as if reluctant to reveal what had been buried. Line by line, my handwriting returned in digital form, my formatting, my structure, my warnings. High exposure risk within 6 months, if no diversification. My breath caught. I scrolled to the bottom. A signature line I remembered typing before sending the draft to my father for review. Authored by Delith Hayes, internal draft, not submitted. Not submitted. That wasn't true. I had submitted it. I stood in my father's office holding that report in both hands, explaining the numbers while he waited for a phone call from Alaric, barely pretending to listen. I handed it to him. He placed it face down on his desk, and somehow that version disappeared. Looking back now, that moment should have told me exactly where the rest of the story was headed. This document wasn't lost. It was buried, hidden deliberately, hidden so someone else could take credit or avoid accountability. The cafe noise faded until all I heard was the low hum of the refrigerator behind the counter. I forwarded the file to Emerson, someone I once trusted, someone who used to bring me cupcakes when work got overwhelming, someone who promised she'd always have my back. She replied minutes later, "I can't be involved in this. I have kids. I need the job." No greeting, no apology, no softness, just fear. I stared at those words until they blurred. It wasn't the refusal that hurt, it was the honesty. She didn't stab me. She didn't need to. She just stepped aside and let everything fall on top of me. They didn't have to hurt me directly. They just had to watch. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. Before I could close the laptop, another message appeared. Same blank subject line. Same anonymous sender. Another attachment. Board presentation. Financial risk slide deck. Final. I clicked. The colors, the layout, the sequencing. I had created this deck during a 12-hour stretch while Mom slept in her chair, asking me every hour if I'd eaten something. The slides were unmistakably mine, except the name on the cover, presented by Awfully Hayes. A comment box in the notes section caught my eye. Just a single line, tiny but unmistakably rebellious. She didn't build this. Ask DH. Someone inside was watching. Someone inside knew the truth. Someone wanted me to see it. For the first time in weeks, my shoulders loosened. Not fully, but enough to breathe. I copied both files. I organized them into a new folder on my desktop labeled Evidence Protected Copy. Then I encrypted them, backed them onto 2 flash drives, and placed one into my coat pocket. The other I locked inside a safe deposit box at the credit union 2 blocks away. The woman behind the counter didn't ask questions. She slid the key toward me the way people do when they sense you're holding things heavier than paperwork. I walked back to the cafe with the key in my palm, feeling its weight press into my skin. It felt like an anchor and a knife at the same time. I'm not exposing them yet. I'm preserving myself. When I move, it won't be in defense. It'll be a verdict. Later, in the quiet of my apartment, I opened a blank document. The cursor blinked at me like a pulse waiting to be named. I titled it, My Record, the Part They Erased. My fingers hovered for a moment, then began to type. On September 9th, 2023, I submitted a financial risk report. It was dismissed. The words steadied me, not because they were dramatic, but because they were true, because truth, once documented, becomes something you can hold, something no one can take without leaving fingerprints. I stared at the cursor, its rhythmic blink like a quiet nod urging me forward. Today it came back. So will I. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. But for the first time since the night everything shattered, I felt the ground shift beneath me, not from collapse, but from strength. The day after I typed those last words, the world outside seemed strangely calm, as if it hadn't noticed the shift happening inside me. I carried my laptop to the kitchen table, poured a cup of tea that tasted more like metal than mint, and opened another live stream. My hands didn't tremble this time. I watched with a steadiness that surprised even me. They kept clapping, even as their empire started to burn from the inside. The screen displayed another awards luncheon, this one hosted by a local chamber celebrating women in finance. And there she was, awfully, standing in a soft pink blazer, smiling like she hadn't stolen a single breath of work that wasn't hers. She adjusted her hair, leaned into the microphone, and thanked everyone for believing in her. Her voice rang with the polished confidence of someone who'd never been told no. I sipped my cold tea and didn't look at her. I watched the crowd instead, watched the stiff backs, the exchanged glances, the investors pretending the foundation beneath them wasn't cracking. They didn't see what was coming, but I did. Behind the scenes, I'd been tipped off. A quiet message threaded through the files I received the night before, one line that changed everything. Check the state filings. I did, and that's where it all started. Alaric had submitted restructuring papers. Buried in legal language was the truth, controlling interest, now 71% under his personal entity. Not the family's. His. I refreshed the page twice, just to be sure. It didn't change. It wouldn't. They called me dramatic. They never saw what silence looks like when it signs a contract. I watched Awfully beam under the stage lights. Completely unaware, her husband had just maneuvered her entire bloodline into irrelevance. The applause washed over her like warm rain. She had no idea she was celebrating at her own funeral. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. Later that afternoon, while walking past my apartment mailbox, I saw a small package wedged tightly inside. The return address made my stomach twist. My sister's. I took it upstairs and opened it on my counter. Inside were scraps of a life they threw away, my old scarf, a couple of books, pens I kept in the kitchen drawer. On one of the items, a sticky note read, "We figured you didn't need this anymore." No apology, no explanation, just dismissal wrapped in bubble mailer. I checked a local resale site a few minutes later. Something compelled me to, and there they were, my mother's pearl earrings, the ones she gave me after my promotion years ago, listed for $25, barely used. My hands trembled, but not from grief. I'd passed grief. I'd passed outrage. This was something else, the kind of cold clarity that removes fear entirely. I was done. I walked to my desk, plugged in my encrypted drive, and opened the evidence folder. Every file sat there like a page of a story waiting to be told. But I didn't send them to the press. I didn't want a spectacle. I wanted a reckoning. So I sent the entire packet, risk report, salary reroute, stolen presentation, to the board of shareholders. Anonymous. One line attached. Review before you renew. That's where it all started. 3 days passed. Quietly, almost eerily. I cleaned the apartment, made tea, slept more than I had in weeks. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. A text message. Is it true? No context, no signature. But I knew the voice behind those 3 words. A board member. Someone who had been around since the early days. Someone who watched my father build that company from a folding table in our garage. I replied with a single document, the original ledger. I didn't add a comment. I didn't need to. A few hours later, I checked the company website. It had shifted to the orange under maintenance page they used whenever they were resetting something big. I refreshed again and again. On the 4th refresh, Alaric's name was gone from the leadership page. Just like that. Looking back now, I should have seen how easy it would be for an empire built on sand to wash away. I closed my laptop and opened a fresh document, not to build a case, but to build a future. My future. I updated my resume. Not because I needed a job right that minute. Not because I was running from what happened, but because writing it reminded me who I had been before they tried to erase me. I paused over the file name, then saved it under a new folder titled, "Now They Know." For the first time in weeks, I felt something steady beneath my feet. It wasn't confidence. Not exactly. It was more like the feeling you get after surviving a storm, when the air is still thick, but you finally believe the roof won't collapse above you. I closed my laptop that night knowing one thing with perfect clarity. The next move wasn't mine to chase. It was theirs to make. 3 days later, someone knocked on my door. Not gently, not hesitantly. The kind of knock that carries history behind it. The kind you recognize before you even reach the handle. When I opened it, rain hit my ankles. My father stood there, soaked through his dress shirt, the fabric clinging to his shoulders like defeat. His hair, once the pride of his appearance, lay plastered against his forehead. Behind him stood awfully, her posture crumpled, her eyes dull, her mascara bleeding like she'd run out of the strength to pretend. There was no sign of Alaric, not even in the distance. My father swallowed hard. "We need your help," he said. "No greeting, no remorse, just necessity. The board wants you at the next meeting." I didn't step aside to let them in. I didn't offer a towel or ask how they were holding up. I simply leaned my shoulder against the doorframe and waited, letting the silence expose the pieces they were trying so desperately to hide. He continued, "It was a misunderstanding. We were scared Alaric lied to us too." Awfully nodded quickly, too quickly. "We should have listened to you. I didn't know. I never thought." I raised a hand slightly, not to silence her, but to protect myself from absorbing even one more excuse. Looking back now, I should have realized that desperation sounds a lot like regret, but it's not the same thing. Without a word, I turned from the doorway and crossed the small living room. My fingers found the manila folder on the second shelf, its edges worn not from time, but from meaning. I held it for a moment, feeling its weight. Not heavy, just full. I returned to the door and placed it directly into my father's hands. "Everything you need to fix what you let him ruin is in there." His grip faltered. "And you?" he asked. His voice, usually firm, unwavering, dropped to a whisper. "Will you come back?" I met his eyes. There was a time when that gaze could unravel me. "Not today." "No," I said. "You made sure of that." Behind him, awfully sucked in a breath sharp and thin. "I thought you'd hate us," she murmured. "I don't," I replied. "I stopped expecting anything. That's all." Her lips trembled. Not from shock. She'd run out of illusions too. I closed the door. The click echoed through the apartment, soft but final. This time, no suitcase sat by the entryway. No shaking hands. No panic lodged in my throat like broken glass. This time, I held the power. I stood there for a few seconds, listening to their footsteps fade down the hallway. Through the peephole, I watched them walk away holding the folder. They didn't open it. Not yet. They were too busy trying to stitch dignity back into a fabric they'd let unravel. The folder wasn't for them. It was for me. Proof that I hadn't imagined it. That everything they tore out of my hands, my work, my warnings, my worth had been real. That's where it all started. A memory broke through then, uninvited. The night they ransacked my room. The way hands rummaged through drawers that held pieces of my life. The way someone shouted, "If you're innocent, prove it." I'd been trembling so violently I could hardly stand. Back then, the silence of my room felt like a prison. Now, the silence of my apartment felt like a fortress. I returned to my desk and opened my laptop. My reflection glimmered faintly in the screen. Older somehow, steadier. I opened my drive, hovered over the backup folder, then clicked empty trash. Every duplicate file vanished. The evidence stayed with the people who needed to face it. I didn't need it anymore. I no longer lived to prove them wrong. I lived to prove myself right. This wasn't vengeance. There was no satisfaction in watching them fall. It was release. I breathed long and slow, feeling the air fill spaces I hadn't realized were empty. I didn't expect forgiveness. Not from them. Not even from myself. But healing doesn't start when they say sorry. It starts when you stop waiting. The sunlight poured in like something alive that morning, stretching in slow stripes across the floorboards warming the cold corners of my apartment that had gone untouched for weeks. I hadn't opened the curtains in nearly a month. I don't know what made me do it now. Maybe the silence had changed, or maybe I had. I stood there for a few minutes, just watching the light move. Dust danced in the beam, like it had somewhere to be. I didn't. I pulled a blanket off the shelf, started folding clothes into a donation bag. I wasn't decluttering. I was shedding a version of myself that had stayed too long. On the bookshelf, a row of my mother's old finance books leaned unevenly against one another. One in particular, green cover, fraying spine, caught my eye. I reached up to move it. That's when the paper fell out. At first, I thought it was a receipt, a bookmark, some forgotten reminder. But when I picked it up, my breath caught. It was her handwriting. The curl of the Y, the narrow spacing, undeniably hers. My knees bent before I realized I was sitting. The letter trembled in my hand as if it had waited years to be read. If you're reading this, it began. It means things fell apart faster than I could fix them. Each word sank into me like water through dry soil. I want you to know I always knew you were the one holding everything together. They didn't see it, but I did. And I hope you never forget who you are. Love, always, Mom. I didn't cry in gasps or fits. My tears came quietly, like an old ache that had waited patiently beneath my skin for the right moment to rise. I held the letter to my chest, not like it was paper, but like it was pulse. All this time, I didn't need them to admit they were wrong. I needed to know I wasn't invisible to her. That's where it all started. Later that afternoon, I found myself walking past the old family office. I wasn't sure what I expected to see. Shattered windows? Empty chairs? But what I saw was far less dramatic and somehow more telling. The name on the building had changed. The font was different. The logo was new. The glass looked cleaner. But the memories still pulsed behind it like static. I paused at the curb, watching my reflection in the window. For the first time, it didn't look small. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. Through the tinted glass, I saw a man pack boxes. It might have been Alaric, or maybe someone else replacing him. Either way, he wasn't looking out the window. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. My phone buzzed later that night. A message from Awfully. We're thinking of rebuilding. No alaric, just something honest. If you ever want in, the door's open. I stared at it for a long while. I didn't delete it. I didn't reply either. Instead, I reached for my journal. On the first page, I wrote my name. Just that. No title. No epalezi. It felt like a beginning. That's where it all started. I folded my mother's letter carefully and placed it into a small wooden box I kept on the nightstand. I locked it, not because I needed to protect it, but because I needed to protect what it did for me. Then I opened the window. The air that drifted in didn't smell like closure. It smelled like freedom. They gave me the silence. I gave myself the voice. Sometimes the people who hurt you won't say sorry. Sometimes they won't even remember what they did. But healing was never about them. It was about learning to exist without permission and reclaiming your voice, even if no one's listening. Have you ever had to walk away from your own family just to survive? Let me know in the comments. And if stories like this speak to you, subscribe, because I have more to tell. And some of them might be your story, too.